Inkwell Podcast is back, Cole.
It is, and we love to do it.
We love to do it. We love to do it today. Today's Thursday, and we moved it up a day for multiple reasons, but the strike's over.
Let them make movies.
There's not a lot of details released yet. I guess SAG still has to ratify the details of the strike with their members and things like that, but as far as I heard, they didn't get one thing they really wanted, which was money from the streamers based on streaming numbers and residuals and such. I don't think they got that one. But as far as AI and some of the other stuff goes.
Right. And that's going to open up a bigger conversation we're going to have just in general in streaming today. But also the way you kind of build that at the beginning was, well, they didn't get one thing they were looking for. Like, they didn't get a single red cent. They didn't get a single dang thing they were looking for. No, they got a few things that they were looking for. Yeah.
Yes.
But the money from streamers and the streaming data is kind of an important part of all this.
And the thing is, the streamers don't release the data to hardly anybody. I mean,
But why not?
They're so scared internally, which I know during the strike they talked about it so much of like, if you found out how little this movie was watched, there'd be an outcry or whatever else, or it hurts the likelihood of something getting made. But also, I just think it's so much more power in their hands to know all this stuff. It's going to be interesting the more advertising comes in, if those numbers will become like the Nielsen reports again or whatever else. But for now, we just keep wondering.
Every single streamer is trying to move to an ad-supported version of it. And so why would advertisers just, oh, trust me, bro, The Crown got X number of watches in the first 2 days. No, I want to see some data before I throw money at you.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. I mean, because SAG can strike every 3 years, I want to say. So we'll see what happens before the next one. Because, yeah, like you said, everyone's moving to ad-supported tiers. Everyone gets to see what happens now that this agreement's reached and no AI, okay. Do streamers treat projects or requests differently? We're going to see what happens.
Okay, so the strike is over, though, which means we're going to start getting movies again. We had a little break of, every single production shut down. The day before they started striking, we got the image of Hugh Jackman and Ryan Reynolds in the classic 90s costumes of Wolverine. And then we strike for however long this has been. Now, apparently, it's got a 2024 release date, and they're going to be resume filming. Stranger Things Season 5 has resumed filming, all these other things, right?
Yeah, and there's a couple things that I guess were already done or mostly done, like Mean Girls, the movie, based on the musical, which was based on the movie.
The movie?
So we get that at the beginning of 2024. I want to say it's, January 12th. And there's a couple other things that were just kind of pushed back for this year, like Yorgos Lanthimos' Poor Things is now going to get released December 8th, so just about a month from now, which will be nice. But there's a lot of movies slated for this year that have been moved back to early next year or later, including, well, we'll just go over the list. What are you most excited to see?
Deadpool 3 is kind of the right answer, but then there's some better movies on here too. Like Dune 2 is the one that has kind of suffered the most internet angst, I think, because we've just passed its original release date, and then it's been pushed. The official new date is March 15th of 2024, because and we've been teasing for a couple weeks, but we're going to do a best November releases ever, and Dune is kind of a November-y kind of movie. All of a sudden it's coming out in March.
The memes from the Film Bros were great. The tears from grown men being like, I want my King Atreides back. Yeah, March is going to be an interesting time because it's like out of the awards season, out of contention for this year. Also really early for next year if it wants to get
way
anything.
Too early. Mm-hmm.
And March is just kind of a weird time for movies. Are you going to be watching March Madness, or are you going to be sitting at Dune? You can do both, but I don't feel like March is the perfect time for this movie, which just, again, points to the impact of the strike.
So what's your most anticipated now that has a new date or that we've been waiting on stuff for?
Well, look, I will never stop talking about Godzilla. The new Godzilla movie got pushed. I forgot. Last week, we were talking on Godzilla Day, as I mentioned Monarch, so perfect timing. Want to call that out. But the
Yep.
new Godzilla Kong movie, the new Empire, that's been pushed back to April 12th. So again, not even a summer release, not going to have a huge summer box office. It's a little spring, throw it in there in spring. Going to be interesting. And I'm really excited about The Bike Riders, which is the Austin Butler, Tom Hardy, Jodie Comer movie, where it's like a biker gang, really rough and tumble, supposed to be shot really well, had a lot of good chatter from those who have kind of seen early bits of it, but they don't even have a release date. So could be end of December to fight with Wonka over Christmas, or it could be sometime early next year. So we're just going to have to see what they decide on that one.
Also, early December is a month away. Like this, the strike has lifted, and so now a lot of things are going to happen very, very fast, and everyone's going to get back to work. But still, a month away is very quick to turn something around like that when we don't even have a release date.
As if film
Like,
marketing
you,
wasn't short enough.
you don't go from TBD to 3 weeks out
Yeah.
generally in this industry.
Yep. What about you? What else are you excited to see?
I mean, there's some of the blockbuster stuff that's on here too, but Ridley Scott has been busy because
Oh,
he's
yeah.
about to get into now his awards shilling for Napoleon, but also he's got a new Gladiator sequel that's going to get back into filming.
Yeah, completely stopped and now they're getting back into it.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean,
let's pause and introduce a brand new segment here on the Inkwell podcast that I like to call From the Twitter Chat. Tristan and I do most of our communicating throughout the week, not in like formal production meetings, but by sharing just memes and stuff on Twitter and then talking about it. And one of the highlights this week was from the Synesthetic Twitter account. Ridley Scott's response to those who criticized the historical inaccuracies in Napoleon, quote, get a life, unquote.
you gotta love it. He's
Also
just
relevant. Also relevant this week, Christopher Nolan was asked if he watched The Batman by like the new Reeves Batman, and his quote was, "No, and I don't want to talk about it in this interview because that's the only thing that you're going to quote and put on Twitter." And what's the only thing I've seen quoted and put on Twitter? The fact that he said that he wouldn't talk about it. So
Yep.
that's journalism, baby.
The years those journalists got out of the Marty Scorsese quote about like Marvel isn't cinema, it's amusement parks. And then they just rode that for years. Now it's just become every director to like, can they talk about Marvel? So we have our one soundbite. Pretty sad. Also, as one who's like a armchair history boy who just loves to, read about the real aspects of a movie, the facts, whatever else. I
Was your
used to be in the
undergrad
camp.
your
It was,
undergrad was
it was
history,
history.
was it
It
not?
was. It was. And
This is an
that
educated
helped
man.
me. It helped me understand why movies should not always be exact history. So I will say, I would have been somewhat offended by Ridley Scott's comment, maybe like, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago. Now I'm like, nah, I'm with him. Sometimes it's better just to let the movie be a movie and tell a story. So I'm excited about Napoleon. I think Joaquin Phoenix is a great choice. And for someone to play Napoleon and the Joker within 4 years, I won't even say he has range. He's just good.
Uh, okay, so we teased it a little bit, but Ridley Scott's back to work trying to do the circuit to make sure that this is now November, Tristan. This is
Yeah.
the prime time of starting the campaigning because you only have till the end of December for all these movies to come out, and then we hit Oscar season hard. So for the sake of the industry, they needed to end the strikes so that all these actors can go on their little talk shows and talk about why their movies are important. But did you miss it for the past few months of like not getting these appearances and not getting all of this?
I like it enough. I don't think I like it as much
Okay.
as some people do.
But you
There's
don't hate it as much as me.
no.
So we have a little spectrum.
Here's what I'll say. There's folks who, when it comes time for political campaigns, that's all they'll talk about. That's all they'll watch. And they just want to talk about the candidates. This is kind of the same thing for entertainment. It's just every year, not every 2 or 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I will say it's my version of the gossip columns and trades because I don't love the gossip columns and trades. So I'm like, if I can have Bradley Cooper and Austin Butler on actors from Variety just BSing and talking about their movies and their process or who starved themselves, who didn't call their mother for 6 months. That's fun to me because actors are weird people, and so are directors and writers and the rest of them. So I do enjoy it. What I don't enjoy, especially being in LA, is the 50th poster that's about to be up for Poor Things, and we're just going to see gnarled faces and Emma Stone in a dress everywhere.
Mhm.
Cool. I know it's part of the city I live in. It's fine. But I don't love how much it's about to be shoved down everyone's throat because we're going to be in crunch time.
See, okay, so we have gotten slightly better at it because you talk about actors on actors is just better than like uneducated dorks like us
Yep.
talking to people, right? They'll let anyone get a media credential and talk about a movie if you're going to hype up that movie and hopefully get more
Yep.
sales. Like the producers and movie studios just like hand those out like candy. So the fact that we have gotten a little bit better, the actors on actors, I mean, Hot Ones honestly is like it's become industrialized, but it's still
Yeah.
kind of really good
It's still
version
good.
of this kind of thing. And they don't always just pander to, oh, and you have a movie coming out this week, right? It's still not really a late night show, but
Yeah.
it gets those same people and lets them, gets them off guard a little bit more. Yeah, I mean, I certainly hate it. You talk about this was very topical of you because it was election day just a couple days ago.
It
So talking about
was.
like the political campaigning, I heard you demeaning city councils by saying it only happens every 2 or 4 years. We're in that off
That's
year.
true.
So
That's true. We're in
how
the off
could
year.
you? No,
I
that's
guess on
exactly
the
what it is.
national scale, on the
This is
national
everything I
scale.
hate about politics. It's everything I hate about the election cycle. It's but
Yep.
boiled into something that I actually care more about, which is movies and entertainment rather than, policy and our lives.
There's people who love to be sold and who love to be charmed. I'm not one of those people. I can walk
Yeah.
into a fancy Tesla store or something else and just want to go look at the car. And if someone's like, let me show you this, let me get you a little drive, let me do that. And I'm just not interested. I think these shows and these cycles and everything else, it's for the people who are like that. I mean, to find out who's actually doing the voting and what their gift bags are and the parties they go to
Yup.
and all the stuff, I'm like, it's really a silly political system. I enjoy watching, yeah, the interviews, the fun stories that come out of it. I mean, one of my favorite cycles was after Uncut Gems. I'm like, I learned more about serious Adam Sandler and some of his crazy things he does. And I loved it. I was like, he went and worked in the jewelry district. Fantastic. I don't think I would have heard it if it wasn't like award season. So excited for those stories, less excited. I've heard rough things about Maestro. Don't know if I should believe him. But after Bradley and Star is Born, I'm like, ooh, am I really excited about him to talk about his prosthetic nose for 4 months? I don't think so.
Right. Well, slightly relevant as we pivot a little bit is to what these studios are now going to do. So, streaming is still this black box that they won't give us any information about, but streaming rights are still all over the place. For example, this week we got news that a full merge of the Disney Plus and Hulu apps are going to happen,
Yep.
which Disney has tried so hard to make their thing the family friendly one and Hulu to be the not, but now they're just gonna merge it anyway because they're desperate and they obviously just need some brand unity. Whenever HBO and Discover merged, people were like, "Oh, maybe it'll be called Discover, maybe it'll be called HBO." No, neither of those brands like meant to. Guess what? The Disney brand. That means that is going to trump
That's a lot.
Hulu. It's going to lap Hulu. It's going to be. It's still just going to be Disney Plus, and there's going to be Hulu stuff on it. So,
Yeah,
but
it's interesting.
there's also more. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I spent a year over in the UK doing a grad degree, and I didn't sign up for a lot of streamers over there. I was either VPNing or whatever. Uh-oh, don't get after me, cops. Anyway, it was weird.
No one does that. That is,
Who has ever
you
done that?
know,
It was weird going down the steps to a tube station and looking to the right and seeing an obvious Hulu show or here Hulu show or an FX show on a Disney Plus banner because the rest of the world doesn't have Hulu. It's everything's just been on Disney Plus. And so I don't remember if it was Atlanta or Snowfall or something, but something truly adult. And I looked over and I
yeah.
was like, Disney Plus, like what? It'd be like if Big Mouth was on, Disney on the weekends or, Disney morning show, Disney cartoons. It would
Yes.
be weird to see that as a tile there. So I think especially in like moralist kind of conservative America, it's going to be a pill to swallow for someone to be like, my kid could be watching DuckTales or they could be watching, you know,
They all have parental
they got
things.
parental
Like every
blocks.
single,
Exactly.
when you sign up for Peacock, it gives you a kid's profile that you can just make
Yeah.
along with your default one. And so the kids one has some boundaries around it, so you can't actually accidentally start watching Naked Attraction or whatever HBO's been throwing on their front page.
Yep. Yeah, it's my question and what I want to see happen. Because obviously Iger and all the Disney folks were scared about the combination, and other people must have said something, or market research would have said, "Oh my gosh, you shouldn't do this," and now it's like, okay, do it. So I want to see what happens. Do we see people hopping off the service because there's things they don't like, or do we see it just continue as normal and we're like, oh, that was a merger? What do we care?
Yeah. And the reality is that other than two dudes on podcasts, people don't care. Like the
Yeah.
consumer data ends up always being people don't care. As much as we can like analyze and try to psycho tell people like, oh man, this is gonna no. It, once you have an app, you're just gonna keep it. Even people that complain, the NFL went through a conservative America problem, and guess what? Its numbers are better than they ever been before. And so, at the end of the day, people don't care.
Yep. Well, and to that point, I think now we're going to see so much moving around between streaming services, like we talked about last week. It's going to hit a point soon enough where you're just going to mega bundle more things. I mean, Super Mario Bros. Is a huge universal IP and everything else, and they're putting it on Netflix on December 3rd, and it'll still be on Peacock. So when you have all these different channels of like, if we're going to have movies on both, why have Peacock if it's going to come to Netflix at the same time? It's only a matter of time until we have like I think it's going to be a Prime coordinated bundle. Amazon is kind of making their stuff just to make their stuff, but if they're going to be like, hey, you have access to most of Max's catalog, some of Netflix's catalog, most of Peacock's, and some of Paramount's for $48 a month. People are going to do it. They're just waiting for
And 2 day
somebody to
shipping.
get it. And 2 day shipping. So that's all we're waiting for. It's kind of like, okay, the streaming wars have died down. We've seen who the bigger winners are. How soon do we bundle and just make it cheaper for everybody else?
Okay, Netflix won the streaming war, and yet I look at this and think the only way Universal agrees to this is if Netflix agreed to a massive sum of money to get Super Mario Brothers to show up on Netflix. And so Netflix is still, despite like we've announced that they are the winner of the streaming war, and yet they are still making rationally bad financial decisions by throwing money after stuff. They just apparently can afford it because they're the first one and they're the only streamer that has brand recognition across the entire globe. And so they're at that too big to fail turn
Yeah.
where they can still throw bad money after whatever they want and seemingly not. So the same bad things we were saying about Netflix before all of this came to a head and we kind of got out on the other side of it after COVID, they're still doing these things. And
Yeah.
yet now we don't care because we've just anointed them the winners.
And that's what's interesting is like their IP that they create, their series, their shows, they don't matter. Like other than
Let's
Stranger
talk about
Things and
it.
a couple movies, they just don't matter. When you
And they don't
have
have lasting, like Stranger Things is in season 5, and that was another just remarkable thing. It's begin filming again, and it's taken them 10 years to give us 35 episodes, and that's like
yeah.
the talk on Twitter right now. And that is ridiculous for a television show. Like you can, there is no justification of like every episode was a movie that can justify still a television show, something
Yeah.
that's made for streaming, even if you can put it in theaters, whatever. Like it still doesn't justify the length and the cost that they have thrown into this because they know that Stranger Things is their only lasting thing
Yep.
that has done numbers for them. Everything else, like Queen's Gambit, was really cool. It was a limited series. Squid Game was amazing. It was a limited series, and they're trying to make it
Yeah.
into a reality. And obviously,
It's
that is going
terrible.
wrong because everyone knew that that was going to go wrong.
Yep.
Netflix has
Yeah,
nothing to their own that they've been able to actually get out there.
no, and they're
Still,
trying to franchise everything from um Extraction to now they're talking about another Red Notice. Now they're talking about uh, spin-offs and all the rest of it. But like when Suits comes on, a syndicated made for television show, and it blows up all of Netflix, it just goes to prove they're not creating what they should be creating. And you have the reality, that's fine. Like, I've watched some Love is Blind, I get it. Eh, Indian matchmaking, Jewish matchmaking, cool. They're making some reality shows, but it just shows they're not making the great stuff that you keep coming back to.
okay. Also, Suits, originally aired on USA, is still on Peacock too. And
Yep.
yet it just proves how no one has Peacock. Everyone has Netflix is the utility. Netflix is so ubiquitous that it was always on NBC Universal's Peacock because it was an
Yeah.
NBC Universal thing. And yet it got its second life because it showed up on Netflix. And literally simultaneous to all this like Suits phenomenon happening, you could have also fired up Peacock and watched Suits there. But that's not what people are talking about. That when you see little TikToks of Suits, it's their press and play on Netflix, not on Peacock.
So let's say you're a producer or you're a studio head. There you go. Do you sell your movie to Netflix or do you
Always.
sell it to anybody else?
Because I think Netflix is willing to put the most. I'm okay propping up because everyone has to act in your own self interest. That's the
Yeah.
only core tenet of economics that has been able to penetrate my brain throughout all these years. And so, if Netflix is the one that's willing to throw the most money at it, I'm okay propping them up with a little bit more content selfishly because they're the ones that are going to be willing to give me the most money. And I'm willing to keep this bubble going for as long as it'll keep making me money, right? Like if I'm a
Ride the
studio head.
wave.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and leading into our releases for this week, that's exactly what David Fincher's done and is doing. He was pissed about Mank in so many other ways, awards, getting shunned, not enough viewers, whatever. But The Killer comes out on Friday for Netflix subscribers, and he's happy to continue making the movies.
Mm-hmm.
So, to your point,
Because they're the ones signing the checks.
and they are big checks.
There's another on Netflix, my review of the week. There's a Sly Stallone documentary called Sly that talks about Sylvester Stallone and starting in Rocky and creating these like 80s heroes and what it's like for his life now. Wonderful framing device of like him making a decision to just move on with his life. He's moving away from LA, and so like packing up his
Wow.
boxes, and so we're taking a tour through his life and the great moments that have led to him being Sylvester Stallone. In the end, just like an absolute mid-tier documentary on just an old, like it's an absolute vanity project that no one, if you weren't already invested in Sylvester Stallone, it's not gonna shine some brand new light on the man. He's obviously a producer, right? it's it's the old like the other band members in Queen making sure that
Yeah.
as they're producing Bohemian Rhapsody, Freddie Mercury goes and does the debauchery, but they're going to go home to their wife because they were allowed to be producers on it.
Because they're
So it
writing it.
paints
Yep.
paints Sly in a wonderful light because he's probably a partial writer of his own documentary. But also, I really love Rocky and First Blood and all these things, and so I really enjoyed it. And I watched it on a plane, and it was perfect.
It makes me happy though that the Sly Schwarzenegger rivalry has continued all the way to Netflix because the Schwarzenegger doc just dropped. I want to say last month. So once again, neck and neck, just putting
Guess
out
what?
things to battle each other.
Arnold in this documentary, and he talks about a little bit of that rivalry, and they're both
Yep.
at the age where they're both willing to admit, like, yeah, we got kind of carried away about with it in the '80s, and now we're chill. So
Yep.
we're not trying to pretend that this is anything that it's not. They're buddies now, and that rivalry always just rose both ships with the tide.
They've done enough expendable movies. They've got to be friends.
Oh yeah.
Speaking of semi-expendable movies, I'm gonna tease this. I saw Killer of the Flower Moon this last week. You
Ooh,
haven't seen it yet, so we're not gonna do a full review. I'm gonna give you three hot takes though.
do
One,
it.
it doesn't feel as long as you think it's gonna feel. just doesn't.
Love to hear it.
I was like preparing for my tailbone to be angry at Marty Scorsese, and I didn't. I was like, oh, that was not as bad as I thought it was. Two, it's way better than The Irishman. I mean, so much better and so much easier to watch. I don't know if there's a rewatch factor to most of his movies for me, but this I could see myself watching again. With The Irishman, I was like, let's just close the door on that story like he has.
Mhm.
No more. And three, I think it's got a good shot at the awards if it can get over the controversy about the way the story was told and yada, yada, yada. I think it's got a good shot. It'll just depend on a little more like how public opinion and how the voters feel about propping up something that is a story told from the white perspective, like the book it's based on, rather than from the perspective of the Native Americans. But I'm going to argue and just die on this hill. It would not have worked in reverse from Martin Scorsese, an 80-plus-year-old Italian man from New York. I think he told the story he could tell, which was adapting a book into a fantastic movie.
Love it. So now I get to carry some of that with me as I go into
Yep.
this movie for the first time. And we'll have a further discussion on that in a coming pod. We will have our best November movies of all time discussion on a coming
Yep.
November pod to get you ready for, if you got to step away from the Thanksgiving table and have had enough time with your relatives, you need a movie to soften that blow. We'll give you some ideas.
So go watch The Killer on Netflix. Go see The Marvels whenever you got time to go see The Marvels. And we'll catch you next week.
Pretty sure you can catch 2 showings of the Marvels, especially with that little discount that Disney is throwing out for the same price and time that it would take
Yeah.
for 1 showing of Killers of the Flower Moon.
You're not wrong. Till next week, Cole.
Till next week.
Go watch some movies.